This is what the Teamsters do. This is who we are. We are united more than ever before. And UPS better wake up. This is where we get shit done, is in Boston. Yes. That's what we do.
On April 2nd, in a sea of brown, there we stood in a parking lot rally of the 120-year-old Teamsters Local 25 in Boston, Massachusetts. Packed like sardines, hundreds of UPSers were revved up, waiting for their union president, Sean O'Brien, to climb onto the back of the flatbed trailer serving as a podium and to address the members of his home local.
I am so proud when I talk to people and they have fire in their eyes. They got intestinal fortitude. They got burning desire in their stomachs to take on this company. Our wages stayed the same. In some cases, they went down. But their balance sheet kept expanding. They made $100 billion off the pandemic. $100 billion with a B. And what did we get? We got nothing. Well, that's going to change April 17th. We go time to pay! Let's go!
Hello, my name is Teddy Ostrow. Welcome to the Upsurge, a podcast about UPS, the Teamsters, and the future of the American labor movement. This podcast unpacks the unprecedented labor fight this year at UPS. In July, the contract of over 340,000 UPS workers will expire. And if those workers go on strike, which is a real possibility, it will be the largest strike against a single company in U.S. history.
July 31st, when Big Brown is shut down, you're going to see supply chain solutions.
The Upsurge is produced in partnership with In These Times magazine and the Real News Network. Both are nonprofit media organizations that cover the labor movement closely. Check them out at inthesetimes.com and therealnews.com, where you can also find an archive of all past episodes. And one more quick thing. We are an entirely listener-supported podcast. We do not play ads. We depend on you to keep the show going. So if you like the show, please become a supporter of our Patreon at patreon.com/upsurgepod. You can find the link in the description. Thank you to our over 40 patrons so far. You are the reason why we can continue to do this. But frankly, we are not sustainable at our current funding level. We need a lot more generous supporters, so we have some wonderful incentives. For example, the next 47 people who become our Patreon supporters will receive a free 1-year subscription to In These Times magazine, one of the best publications covering the labor movement today. Also, depending on your tier of patronage, you may also receive exclusive content, like the research that goes into the show or bonus episodes, which, trust me, you do not want to miss. All right. Enough of that. On to the show. That is the sound of a rally that my co-producer Ruby Walsh and I attended on April 2nd in Boston. It was a kickoff action to put pressure on UPS and build engagement among union members ahead of April 17th. And in this episode of The Upsurge, we'll take you inside and outside of the bargaining room. Now, you can't see it, but I'm putting the word began in air quotes. And that's because, well, negotiations at the national level actually haven't really begun. And that is because the union leadership has put UPS on notice. As a power move, Sean O'Brien has said that they will not negotiate with the company on the national contract until the supplementals, basically UPS's smaller regional agreements with different locals around the country, until those are done. And while UPS's CEO, Carol Tomé, is insisting that everything is fine and that the company and the Teamsters are, quote, not far apart on the issues, if you talk to any worker, you'll hear what the reality is on the ground.
I feel like the negotiations started off good and now UPS is dragging their feet. The same old thing, playbook. They've done every contract since I can remember.
They're not at the bargaining table. From what we've understood, we've seen pictures of them not showing up. We've seen them, they are not doing what they need to be doing.
That's right. Photos posted to social media by Teamsters across the nation show long conference tables. On one side, sit union officers and rank-and-file UPSers, arms folded, visibly frustrated. On the other, empty chairs. And when UPS does show up to negotiations, the conversations aren't going as hoped.
If I gave them the majority of what they wanted, my local 804 supplement would be gutted completely. It would be worthless.
we just made this company $318 billion, and now they're asking for more. What did our members get during the pandemic? Was there any hazard pay? Man, we had members that died. UPS didn't care.
The 5-year collective bargaining agreement at UPS expires on July 31st. Now, during contract negotiations at any union, there's usually one of 3 things that can happen if a new contract isn't settled on before the old one's expiration. First, the company and the union may temporarily extend the old contract until they can come to a new deal. Second, the company may initiate their own work stoppage, preventing workers from going to work in what's called a lockout. And third, the union may call a strike, and the workers, if they're ready, will hit the picket line. Now, it's increasingly looking like that third option is what's going to happen. And that's why we're seeing Teamsters around the country take the negotiations outside the bargaining room and into the workplace with rallies, parking lot meetings, and trainings in 25 cities for these kinds of actions and more. You'll hear from UPSers in Rhode Island, California, Massachusetts, and New York. But the union isn't the only party that's taking negotiations outside the bargaining room. Here's a package car driver, Carlos Pina, and part-time warehouse worker Maya Morris in Boston.
UPS is putting their foot on the gas and disciplining over unnecessary things more than ever now. You know, you walk in, they say, oh, you don't got the right shoes on. All right, take the day off. They're nitpicking all these little things on us just to, try to shake up us a little bit,
The company's like dragging us through the mud, basically. They're using us as kind of the chess pieces in their game, taking hits at us to take hits at the union. And so, for instance, a lot of us are being laid off. People here are being laid off. Or having our hours cut.
In this episode, we wanted to bring you inside the bargaining room, as well as outside of it. But admittedly, the former has been a bit difficult. And that's because, well, there's often an air of secrecy around contract negotiations. Either for lack of trust of the membership, or worse, unions aren't always the most open about what's going on behind closed doors. So the rank and file and the rest of us can feel pretty left out. Thankfully, we got to talk to 2 of the most open leaders in the entire Teamsters union. You'll hear from them shortly, but first we thought maybe we should take a couple steps back. Many workers, perhaps yourself included, don't even labor under a contract at all, and most of us certainly not under a collective bargaining agreement. That is, a labor contract that is negotiated not on an individual basis, but collectively, through a union that represents the workers. So as a first order of business, we thought we'd ask somebody, what even is a contract?
It's the agreement on your employees are going to show up and do this. You as a company, when your employees show up and do that, you as a company, you're going to do this. You're going to pay them to do their job.
That is Dean Doss. Out of Teamsters Local 63 in Ontario, California, he drives tractor-trailer trucks for UPS, where he's worked for 37 years. And that is his bare-bones explanation of the contract. But I gave him a call because he's known in the union as a guy who kinda just knows things. I'm just curious if you all, how'd that all come about? How have you assumed this role as Teamster historian of sorts?
I read a lot.
Dean is a self-described nerd. He's probably read about every book on UPS out there, both the pro-union and the pro-company ones. He even collects print copies of the UPS contracts. And he doesn't just collect them, he reads them too.
I like to go back and see, going back to the older contracts and see the evolution of the language.
Now, that's no easy task. When you have a company as big as UPS, the contract can get pretty complicated. And there wasn't always just one master agreement that covers all UPSers nationally. Dean explained why.
The history of the company was started in Seattle, went to the West Coast, went to New York, went to Chicago, and then from there spread out to the rest of the United States. While all that was happening, all those different places were just negotiating with just the locals that were in those areas. It wasn't one huge cohesive unit negotiating together.
But eventually, Dean explained, the Teamsters realized they'd have a lot more bargaining power if they negotiated together, like Teamsters workers in the freight industry. So in 1979,
the Teamsters got together and said, hey, we're going to have a national master agreement just like the national master freight contract. And so they got together and did that. But a lot of the locals didn't want to do that. They said, no, we want our autonomy. We want to maintain some control of our area. So they offered them the chance to have their supplementals and their riders for their individual areas.
So basically what Dean's explaining is that in addition to the national contract, there are other agreements UPSers fall under that vary by region. Dean, for example, he falls under the Western Region Supplement, alongside a number of other states on the West Coast. During my video call with him, he showed me the pages of his contract books, which were color-coded, each shade representing a part of the whole.
The National Master Agreement is the white section, and it's half of the contract book that I have.
That's the section that covers all UPS workers. Then there's the one for supplements, and another for what's called riders.
The Western region is the yellow pages, and so like when we're stewards and we're talking, we're like, well, it's in the yellow section. Oh, it's in the blue section.
Now, speaking to Dean, it became clear that having a contract is one thing, but having an organized union membership enforcing that contract is another. And that means workers, and especially shop stewards like Dean, knowing the national agreement and their relevant supplement inside and out. That's because while the language for the national is the same across the workforce, the language for the different supplementals and riders, they can be quite different.
So it's interesting to go through that and read who has what, and, ooh, they have better language over there than we have. Oh, they have worse language over there than we have. Everybody's paid break time, everybody's paid holidays is a little bit different from supplement to supplement.
And it's not only break time and paid holidays that differ. Overtime protections, top pay rates for certain jobs, and other issues vary too. So across the country, different locals may be dealing with different issues. But despite the complexity of the contract, I had to ask Dean a simple question. How would you feel if you didn't have a contract?
At UPS, I can't imagine. What they expect out of the employees, the time standards and all that they have, it's difficult to impossible to achieve those time standards. I can't imagine not having the contract.
I've heard this take from UPSers before, that the company wouldn't be as efficient without a union contract. But Dean also emphasized that without it, well, working conditions and pay would definitely be worse, mirroring perhaps those of the mostly non-union Amazon and FedEx. Now, remember what I said near the beginning, that it is these supplemental and rider contracts that Teamsters leadership is demanding must be finished across the country before they move on to bargaining the national. Bear with me for a second. I know this stuff is a little wonky, but it's important that you understand that this is a power move by the Teamsters union. Before this year, the national contract was usually bargained first and supplementals later. But the new Teamsters president, Sean O'Brien, made the strategic decision to flip it.
I think that the company, UPS, is totally taken aback and confused by the way these negotiations are happening.
That's Vinnie Perrone, president of the powerful Teamsters Local 804 in New York. And in addition to negotiating his own local supplement, he's on the negotiating committee of the national contract.
Because since I could remember, and I started in 1994, the supplements were negotiated after the national was already done. So with Sean coming out and saying that the supplements have to be done before the national contract is negotiated, I think that really threw UPS for a loop.
The reason is, in the past, the international union would pressure its various locals, like Vinnie's, to hurry up and finish their supplements after the national was done, forcing them to make some concessions to the company along the way. But now, the onus is on UPS to take negotiations seriously, to finish them up before the national contract expires and the union threatens a strike. Now, Vinnie of 804, he's probably one of the most vocal and open local presidents in the entire Teamsters union. So I thought I'd ask him, what does bargaining for his supplement even look like?
We had routinely 20 people there. The company had 14, 15 people there. We had to rent a conference room in a hotel. It's set up where it's basically long tables on one side and long tables on the other, and we square off.
By square off, Vinnie means that each side will go back and forth presenting proposals, asking questions, and making clarifications. The union or the company may call a caucus, basically a break to discuss issues privately on each respective side. On the Teamsters side, in addition to lawyers and union officers, rank and file from each job classification sit in on the bargaining too.
There are 10 members on our rank and file committee. Most of them are shop stewards, a few are not. And we expect them to go back and tell the membership what's going on in negotiations.
804 and other locals across the country have been inclusive of rank and file in negotiations for some time. The point is to keep members engaged and garner their expertise on their own jobs. But for the first time in 26 years, actual workers are joining national negotiations too. Now, while some workers feel that the union still deals with transparency and democracy issues, that's a big deal for a union that has for so long, under conservative leadership, pretty much shut workers out entirely, in what UPSers have referred to as a brownout. Now, besides the logistics of bargaining, we also wanted to know how it actually feels to be in that room.
So it starts off cordial. You get their proposals, then it becomes frustrating, and then that's when the tension comes in.
That is the militant Richard Hooker Jr., Secretary-Treasurer of the Philadelphia Local 623. I spoke to him about his supplemental negotiations, too.
Because now they begin to show you who they really are. And so when you go into that mindset, you also become irate and frustrated, but you can't let that stop you from doing what you need to do while you're there. You don't want to get emotional.
Is it hard not to?
Oh my God, yes, it is, because you can see and feel the disrespect every time they open their mouth.
But Richard and Vinnie keep their cool. They have to, for their bargaining committee and the thousands of union members they're representing at the table. There's a number of issues they need to address. Major ones like part-time wages and the abolition of the two-tier driver system, those will be handled at the national level. What Richard and Vinnie are fighting for include longer breaks for part-timers, MLK Day and Juneteenth as paid holidays, better language related to discipline, and other things particular to each of their locals. And while some progress has been made, for the most part, UPS is playing hardball.
UPS is not even trying to bargain in good faith, actually regressive bargaining.
If I gave them the majority of what they wanted, my local 804 supplement would be gutted completely. It would be worthless.
Around the country, the union has been hearing the same song from UPS, that they will only engage in quote-unquote cost-neutral bargaining. You may be wondering, what the heck is that?
Well, this is not the first time that they've done this. Besides cost-neutral, they have used the term, well, it's got to be one for one. If we give you something, we need to get something.
Richard gave me an example.
So right now, we have the day after Thanksgiving or Black Friday. You get paid for that holiday, right? So what they're saying is, we'll give you Martin Luther King Day, but we got to get that day back, that Black Friday day. That's cost neutral. If you want us to give you this, you got to give us that.
Now, the company claims that their package volume is down and that they can't put more money on the table. But Richard and Vinnie are calling their BS.
That's been their mantra for the last 10 years that I've experienced it. Every year they make a record profit. So now, which is it? There's no new money. You're not making more money, which is a lie, because they report everything to their shareholders, right?
We just made this company $318 billion in the lifetime of this contract, and now they're asking for more. They want more concessions. What did our members get during the pandemic? Was there any hazard pay? Man, we had members that died. UPS didn't care. They was out there delivering, sorting, loading. They didn't care, so we don't care.
And cost neutral as a phrase, they explained, is pretty misleading.
Frankly, you talk about cost neutrality. There's been no cost neutrality for the last 20-something years. We've gone backwards. Our part-timers have suffered. The minimum wage goes up, and we have minimum wage earners in a Teamster union. That's a shame. It's a crime.
cost neutrality is not the only corporate speak that's echoing across bargaining rooms around the country. They're also demanding flexibility. On its face, that sounds friendly enough, but in reality, Richard and Vinnie explained it's just another way to exploit the workforce.
They want to be able to schedule workers anytime, any place throughout the week. That's what it means. They want to be able to tell you, you can work Monday and Tuesday, off Wednesday, come back to work Thursday or Friday, or something crazy like that. They want to be able to manipulate the schedule however they want to and have the member work.
Yes, you heard that right. UPS wants to be able to schedule workers any 5 days out of a 7-day week. You can imagine that's pretty sweet for UPS, but it makes living a normal life nearly impossible for the worker.
Well, what about your family? How can you live? Your quality of life? How can you plan your life around a inconsistent schedule, you know?
UPS is gunning for another iteration of flexibility in the expansion of independent contractors. Basically, delivery drivers that are worse paid, less protected, and non-union.
They've been doing this for a number of years, and we actually took them to arbitration on it with their PVD driver, that, you know, basically a Uber Eats type driver that delivers out of their own personal vehicle. They want a gig economy type workforce.
Now, there is another prime example of this concessionary flexibility, and that is, of course, the introduction of the two-tier driver system, which we discussed in episode 4. As a reminder, that's the creation of new 22-4 driver jobs, but for worse pay, less protections, and a Tuesday through Saturday schedule. Now, Richard told me about something even worse that UPS is proposing this time around, and they're playing dirty to try to get it. It all started when Richard thought that the union and the company were actually coming to an agreement on one issue in the contract.
So we have this provision in our supplement about full-time jobs and how they're administered, and part-timers and how they get full-time jobs. So we wanted to clean that up because it's a problem. So we worked it out. We cleaned it up. Everybody was in agreement at the table. This was another major victory that we were going to get. I mean, we had it nailed down. So we come back to meet. They give us this paper, the proposal, the TA that we had. And they slid in what I like to call 224s on steroids.
To be clear, Richard is saying that after the union and the company had explicitly agreed on a specific proposal, UPS tried to sneak in some extra language that created a whole other classification of driver. Basically, the 22-4, but much, much worse.
If you look at 224s now, at least they gained seniority, full-time seniority, right? Things like that. But what they tried to do was have these other 224 on steroids, that I'm calling it. They're not gaining any seniority. They're not full-time. They're going to eat up all the overtime from our regular package car drivers. And it was just going to be a complete mess.
As for 22-4s on steroids, flexibility, and cost-neutral bargaining, Vinnie, Richard, and negotiating committees around the country are telling UPS, no way.
That's not what the Teamsters are interested in.
We said, no, we're not doing that. You guys are regressive. You guys are entering in, again, regressive bargaining, because we agreed to something, and then you snuck this in there to make it worse.
Now, with the Teamsters union explicitly saying it will go on strike if there's no contract by August 1st, I asked Richard what he thinks UPS's strategy is.
I think UPS, as cocky and arrogant as they are, they don't believe that we are committed to the fight. If UPS was concerned at all, then they would act a lot differently than what they're acting. You only got 12 weeks left. That's all you got. You mean to tell me that I know as a company, everything is dependent on my workers, and I'm not even coming to the table in some places? That means that they don't care. And they don't think that we have enough to fight back. But they're in it for a rude awakening. I'm telling you. If this thing is not done August 1st, they're going to find out the hard way.
Back outside, rank and file around the country are taking it to the streets to fight for the issues that matter to them. Here's Rosie Stadronsky from Local 63 in California, and Abraham Jules from Local 804 in New York.
I want the part-timers to finally get the contract that they deserve. It's time that the part-timers get paid. And it's not just money. They need language. We need strong language for the part-timers.
Pretty much, yeah, I'm here speaking on behalf of all the 22.4 drivers. Pretty much a two-tier system where the company is paying a generation of drivers much less than a regular package car driver. Obviously, we all see that it's unfair. You know, we're working longer hours, delivering higher volumes, and we're just looking to eliminate that and put a change to that.
Workers are hitting the gates, handing out leaflets before and after workers' shifts, holding pre-work parking lot meetings, and even conducting trainings so that workers and less active locals can learn how to build bottom-up power. Here's Corey Levesque, a 15-year Teamster out of the militant Local 251 in Rhode Island.
We're here today to show the company that we're united, we're together across all classifications, whether we got guys that are starting off their career or ending their career. We're united and we're ready to fight for the contract that we deserve.
On the other side of the country, part-timer Jose Francisco Negrete, who you heard from in episode 3, well, he was kind enough to speak to a range of Southern California UPSers who rallied by the hundreds at his home local of 952.
Hello, I'm here with members from 542 of San Diego, local out of San Diego. So, what are you doing here at the rally today?
We're fighting for unity.
Creating solidarity with the members.
Coming to support our president and what he's doing in negotiations for the contract.
Talking about negotiations.
And back in Boston, we ran into some familiar faces.
You see this kind of energy? I personally, I haven't felt this kind of energy since I was 22 years old in 1997.
Yes, that's Antonio Rosario, Teamsters Local 804 from episode 1.
When Ron Carey came down to Local 804 and gave his speech and told us that we were going to be ready to hit the streets, that's what I felt here today, man. I felt like I was 22 years old just now. You know, you could feel it. It's electrifying, you know?
Politicians, community groups, and most importantly, other workers, non-union and union alike, have been also coming out to show their solidarity with their Teamsters siblings. At a Local 804 rally in my hometown of Brooklyn, I had the chance to speak to an Amazon worker, Connor Spence. He's a rank-and-file organizer with the Amazon Labor Union, which successfully organized the company's first unionized facility in Staten Island. He explained why he supports the Teamsters.
Well, for one, we're currently engaged in a fight for our own contract. Having won our union election at JFK 8 over a year ago, we still can't get Amazon to come to the table and start negotiations. And really the only way to do that is to go on strike. So, of course, if UPS, those workers go on strike in the course of trying to negotiate their contract, that's 300,000 workers that we can point to as an example for our workers and say, like, this is how it's done. You know, just take a look at what they're doing and we can model what we want to do after that.
When you talk to UPS Teamsters, they're aware of the stakes of these negotiations. And back in Boston, we got to ask Sean O'Brien himself what the UPS contract means for the future of the Teamsters Union and the broader labor movement.
It is the future of the Teamsters Union. We're going to set the tone on every single negotiation we go into. We're going to utilize this as a template to make certain that every single employer knows that if they don't respect their workers, that they're going to be treated just like UPS is moving forward. And look, everybody says we want to strike. No one wants to strike. UPS, if they don't give our members what they want and they deserve and they're worthy of, they're going to cause the strike, not the Teamsters.
Now, while there's a lot of excitement around the country, there's also a great deal of frustration. And that's because the Teamsters aren't the only ones who are taking negotiations outside the bargaining room.
You hear it all across the nation. They're cutting routes. In my building, personally, they stopped giving the 22-4s overtime on Mondays. And they're actually bringing people from other buildings to take our overtime.
They're, sending people home. They're claiming volumes down. Then all of a sudden, like a random Friday, we get killed with, extremely heavy days. So we can kind of see the games are starting to be played.
We heard stories like this everywhere. And in Boston, as Ruby and I zipped around the rally, we noticed a group of young UPSers huddled in the back of the parking lot.
You guys are working with UPS?
Our UPSers, yes. This feels like a lot of pressure right now. I got like a whole circle looking at me.
It turned out they were all part-time warehouse workers, and they had a lot to say. Here's Harry Schofield and Maya Morris.
You said you were being affected by layoffs. Which of you are being affected?
All of us.
Can you tell me about that?
Pretty much our facilities, they just decided that we're not getting enough work at our facilities, our packages, which from my coworker's point of view, the trucks down the line, there was no reason for me to be laid off. Not as much as I am. Like, with me gone, the splitting goes to the next person, and those people have to load 2-3 trucks apiece. They can't keep up.
They see, the potential of their bottom line of being affected, and so what's the first to go? Labor. So they're cutting costs. That means they're cutting our hours and our jobs.
Harry and Maya said they feel like pawns in UPS's twisted game.
Before, I think we're being used as the chess pieces in a way. They're trying to attack the union because they see that the strike is going to happen, and so by attacking the union, they're trying to attack us workers. They're cutting over and above the amount that package volume has dropped so that people are working the job of 2-3 other people. That's insane.
Do you guys feel safe doing that type of stuff? It's really not that safe. I mean, I've had times at my facility where since they've laid off so many people, the boxes come down the belt and they are flying off of the belt. They're almost hitting other people.
Now, speaking to other UPSers, it was clear that layoffs weren't just affecting part-timers. Here's Fabrizio Matracia, a full-time helper in Brooklyn.
I'm a full-time helper. Basically, full-time helper is just being on the truck with the driver, doing everything the driver does, just minus the driving, basically. What's happening to me personally and other people like me is like we're getting displaced, meaning they took us off the road and put us in the warehouse to do basically part-timer jobs, but they're split shifting us, where in order to make our 8 hours, we have to come 4:30 in the morning to 8:30, go home, come back 4:30 to 8:30 at night.
Fabrizio explained that kind of schedule takes a serious toll on the body.
So a lot of times we're getting very little sleep. We're getting overworked because they're just shoving down packages down our throats. We're touching at least minimum 1,000 packages a day. So like with the lack of sleep and the over amount of work, we're getting exhausted because we've been doing this for 4 months now. And for doing it 4 months straight, it just wears your body down to a point where it's like at any moment you feel like your body's just going to break.
Back to the part-timers in Boston. When we asked these young workers what they were fighting for, Ruby and I were surprised by how quick they were to spin their fight to a broader struggle for workers across the United States.
Beyond just each individual thing in the contract, I think it's really being able to revive the labor movement with just the scale of UPS workers, the amount of them all within this union,
It was clear that Maya Morris, with only a few months under her belt at UPS, was a leader. As she spoke, everyone listened, and you couldn't shake the feeling that the future was in these young workers' hands.
There's an ability to really shake up this country and to show people that it's possible to be able to take a stand against our employer and to, extend that fight as long as possible until we get our win. And then if we show that has ripple effects into the society, that has ripple effects, and it affects the other workers in other industries that are also getting shafted by their employers, to say that, we actually want to stand for our dignity. We want to stand for the ability to not just drown, but to be able to get a little bit more crumbs out of this employer that's taking the lion's share of the things that we produce.
You just listened to episode 6 of the Upsurge. Now, I just wanted to say that negotiations are currently happening and a lot can change quickly. As I recorded the bulk of this episode, I was told that Vinnie Perrone's Local 804 supplement actually came to a tentative agreement with the company, but we don't have details just yet. Meanwhile, roughly 15 supplemental agreements out of 40 still haven't been settled yet. Without those, national negotiations will not start. So please stay tuned. We'll have some updates on our end when those national negotiations get started. The Upsurge is produced in partnership with In These Times and the Real News Network. Both are nonprofit media organizations that cover the labor movement closely. Check them out at inthesetimes.com and therealnews.com, where you can also find an archive of all our past episodes. You can also show your support by sharing the episode on social media, giving us a 5-star rating, and writing a review. Follow us on Twitter at UpsurgePod and Facebook The Upsurge. You can also listen to us on our YouTube channel. But the best way to show your support is by becoming a patron of the show at patreon.com/UpsurgePod. We are a listener-supported podcast and can't continue without you. You can find a link in the description. Now, before our patron shoutouts, I just wanted to give special thanks to Jose Francisco Negrete of Local 952, who sent me a ton of audio from the rally he attended there. And also, I wanted to thank Rand Wilson, Teamsters for a Democratic Union, Teamsters Local 251, and Corey Levesque for the audio they contributed to this episode. On to our special thank yous and shout outs to our patrons at the business agent tier or higher. Greg Kerwin, Emil McDonald, Yoni Golajov, Jason Cohn, Jason Mendez, Richard Hooker Jr., Tony Winters, David Allen, Justin Allo, Tim Peppers, Dan Arlen, Dimitri Legas, Juliet Kang, Rand Wilson, Randy Ostrow, Mac Harden, and Timothy Kruger. All of your support means so much. Thank you. The podcast was edited by myself. It was produced by NYGP and Ruby Walsh. Music is by Casey Gallagher. The cover art was done by Devlin, Claro, Resetar. I'm Teddy Ostrow. Thank you for listening, and catch you next time.